$75 billion taxpayer dollars to save up to 9 million struggling homeowners. It's part of President Obama's housing rescue plan, but does it risk making home ownership a birthright and not a privilege? Malia Lazoo is joining the debate. But first, Gary B., what do you say?
Well, Dagan, I think we've moved past birthright. We moved into government mandate. I mean, it's almost like the government now is forcing people into homes. And I'll tell you what, if you can't afford a home and you've been on the other side, you've been responsible in paying, you got to keep the people that can't afford the homes in the homes. Look, I even go back to the point of I don't even know why the interest rate deduction, the mortgage deduction is in the tax code. That's another way the government says you should live in homes. Why is home ownership better than rental? And I'll tell you what, the rental option is what these people who are in these foreclosed homes, 95% of them should be there anyway.
But it is a privilege to own a home, Malia, not a right, not an entitlement.
That's absolutely right, and I think it's also an insane thought to say that it's the people's fault. Our system here is broken, and we need to fix the system. The system did not protect people getting mortgages. Subprime mortgages were being handed out like hotcakes, and people thought that they could afford a home. They went through a process. Now Barack Obama needs to stabilize our economy. We need to make sure that we don't have 9 million people homeless. That is far from saying that it's a government mandate to have a house. What it's saying is that our system
Wells Fargo didn't knock on my door and say, hey, here's your mortgage. And that they need, the system needs to be fixed, and then we can look at who to blame.
Well, Malia,
so
working class Americans.
Malia, let Toby get in here.
Malia, if we're going to fix the system, and I'm all for that, then let's fix it correctly. Number one, what's broken? What was broken? Hang on. What's broken? All right. What's broken, Malia? Hang on. Look at me. Take a breath. The first thing that was broken is that we had a system that ran amok. Fully agreed, and we had a business model that was busted, and that is broken, so that's gone. You don't fix a problem by starting another problem. Now we're saying that we're going to take money and give it to people and buy down loans that they can't afford now, number one. They're in homes they can't afford now. We've got to let the process go through and get it to people who can afford these homes at much lower prices, by the way.
And can I throw this in here as well? Look what the system you're setting up. If you allow people, a bankruptcy judge, to go in and imply mortgage modification. Now, who is ever going to lend to anyone again when they think that somewhere down the road, if these people decide that they, one of the two couples decides not to work anymore, now they can get their mortgage modified to lower interest rates and lower principal? I'm not going to loan money to them. I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Why am I paying my mortgages?
You're paying your mortgage because you want to have a home. There is an American value about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Some men who are much smarter than us wrote that down. What we are saying here is that millions of Americans got caught in a system that is busted. For us to say that they did not get the protection and therefore they should be held responsible is irresponsible as a country. And as an American, I think that it's an absolute shame that we can sit here and as we're facing the economic crisis of our time and say it's okay for 9 million people to go homeless, to default on homes, for our values to continue to fall. What we need to do is we need to build.
Pat, does this program, though, make housing now an entitlement for everybody?
Of course it doesn't.
No, I think that's overstating the case a little bit. I don't think we need to keep people in homes they can't afford. That just kicks the problem down the road a little bit further. You have to let the market clear. You have to let prices find their, a value where a willing buyer and seller will meet. Otherwise, this problem doesn't get solved. And I'm very glad Gary B. pointed out that we have been, subsidizing home ownership for some time and distorting the system.
Sometimes
subsidizing, through the tax break on interest rates. But this is not a new thing, gang.
Right, but the idea that we're going to now put the pixie dust down and say because the government didn't regulate the mortgage industry well enough and the mortgage industry went amok, the individuals walked in an office, they put a bunch of papers in front of Malia, they signed it and said, I'm borring the money to buy a home at this price. They made a mistake in capitalism, but remember, in capitalism we have to have failure.
It's un-American, it's ridiculous.
Well, but Malia, we have to have failure in capitalism so that we can grow again. All you're doing is delaying failure.
What we're doing is we're trying to stabilize.
Let's touch on Pat's point real quick. California is a great example of a market clearing itself Prices went down 40%. And you know what? The total amount sold in California for the first time in months was last month because more units were sold. That's the way the system is supposed to work.
9 million homeless is another one of those fear tactics that you're doing.
Can we just weigh in, though? But the government policies help everybody, including the rich. You got $1.1 million that you on home debt that you can deduct. That's insanity.
Hey, I like that idea.
I totally agree, Dagan. I don't think there should be a mortgage interest rate deduction in the tax code that pushes people into homes. Look, this is the government's way of saying home ownership is good. Well, there's a lot of good things out there. You know, exercising daily is good.
This is also the government saying that when we make a mistake,
but wait a second, Malia. Here's the other thing. Those 9 million people, you make it sound like every one of those 9 million people is going to go living in a cardboard tent out on the streets. That's not true. Most of those people should have been living rent-free for months. They shouldn't be in those homes, and all they're going to do is take the money they saved and they're going to go rent a place. That's what's going to happen. And as Pat said, it's going to allow the mortgage market to clear.
Final word. And Malia, thank you. U.S. car makers hitting up Uncle Sam.